The crystalline ships appeared in Earth's orbit on a warm September morning, their faceted surfaces refracting sunlight into countless rainbow patterns across the sky. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the United Earth Defense Command Center, her dark eyes fixed on the main holographic display as it tracked the geometric formations of the alien vessels. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies," Lieutenant Park reported, his fingers dancing across the neural interface. "The message is being translated now." The alien transmission filled the command center with a voice that seemed to sparkle like ice crystals. "People of Earth, we are the Coraxian Collective. Your civilization has been calculated to have a 99.874% probability of causing destructive chaos in the galaxy. We offer you integration into our perfect pattern. Resistance is mathematically futile." Chen shared a look with Dr. Maya Patel, Earth's leading genopsychologist. Something about the message felt off, too precise, too certain. In her 20 years of military service, Chen had learned to trust her gut instincts about threats, and right now those instincts were screaming. The next 12 hours were a blur of diplomatic attempts. The Coraxians landed a single representative at the United Earth Council, a being that appeared to be made of living crystal, its movements precise and geometric, its voice carrying the same crystalline resonance as the broadcast. "Your species operates on emotional impulses and illogical decisions," the Coraxian ambassador stated. "This creates a 97.235% probability of interstellar conflict within the next century. The pattern requires your integration." Dr. Patel, sitting next to Chen during the negotiations, passed her a tablet with notes. "Notice how they quantify everything. Even their gestures follow geometric patterns. They're not just using mathematics. They're bound by it." Chen had noticed something else too. When council members asked unexpected questions or made emotional appeals, the Coraxian ambassador would pause for exactly 2.5 seconds before responding with a slightly reworded version of its previous statements. It never truly engaged with new ideas. It simply processed them through whatever mathematical framework it used to view the universe. The negotiations ended with an ultimatum. Earth had 48 hours to accept integration into the Coraxian pattern, or face mathematical correction. As the alien ships maintained their perfect hexagonal formation above Earth's major cities, Chen gathered her top analysts. "They're not just advanced," she explained, projecting the data they'd gathered. "They're predictable. Look at their ship formations, perfect hexagons with exactly 1,000 kilometers between each vessel. Their communications are all based on mathematical progressions. Even their threats follow statistical patterns." Dr. Patel nodded eagerly. "Their entire civilization appears to be based on mathematical certainty. They don't just use logic. They're enslaved by it. They can't comprehend anything that doesn't fit their patterns." Lieutenant Park pulled up more scans. "Their weapons are incredibly advanced. Some kind of crystalline energy technology we can't even begin to understand. But look at this." He highlighted their attack formations from similar conflicts across the galaxy. "They always follow the same tactical algorithms. Perfect, precise, and predictable." Chen finished, a plan already forming in her mind. "They expect us to either submit or respond with conventional military tactics, strategies they can calculate and counter. But what happens when you introduce something their patterns can't predict?" Dr. Patel's eyes widened as she understood. "Chaos. Not random chaos, but deliberate, calculated unpredictability. They literally cannot process actions that don't fit their mathematical models." Chen stood, her decision made. Earth had 47 hours left, and she intended to use every minute of them. Contact every military commander worldwide. Tell them to prepare for Operation Paradox. It's time to show these living calculators why human unpredictability has always been our greatest strength. As her orders went out, Chen watched the crystalline ships glittering in orbit, their perfect formations unchanged. They thought they had humanity figured out, reduced to mathematical probabilities and logical certainties. They were about to learn that some things in the universe simply couldn't be calculated. Dr. Maya Patel hadn't slept in 36 hours, but her mind was racing faster than ever. The holographic displays in her lab showed thousands of data points from the Correxian ships, their movements, communications, energy signatures, all forming intricate mathematical patterns that seemed beautiful at first glance. "They're not just using math," she explained to Admiral Chen and the assembled military leaders. "They're trapped by it. Look at these neural scans from their ambassador." The display shifted to show crystalline patterns that pulsed with energy. "Their very thoughts are geometric progressions. They don't think in concepts. They think in equations." Lieutenant Park's fingers flew across his console, compiling more data. "We've analyzed their ship movements over the past day. Every course correction, every formation shift, follows perfect mathematical ratios. The golden ratio, pi, the Fibonacci sequence, it's like they're dancing to the music of mathematics." "But that's their weakness," Chen said, her voice firm. "They can't comprehend anything that doesn't fit their patterns. Show them the combat simulations." The display changed to show historical footage of Caraxian conflicts across the galaxy. In every battle, their ships moved in identical formations, their weapons fired in perfect sequences, their tactics following precise mathematical progressions. They won through overwhelming technological superiority, but their strategies never varied. They've never faced an enemy that truly challenged their assumptions, Dr. Patel continued. Their technology is incredibly advanced, but their thinking is rigid. They literally cannot process actions that don't follow mathematical logic. General Santos, commander of Earth's South American forces, leaned forward. "So how do we use this against them? Our weapons can barely scratch their ships." Chen's eyes gleamed. "We don't fight their technology. We fight their minds." She activated a new simulation. Operation Paradox has 3 phases. First, we present them with human behavior that follows clear patterns they can analyze and predict. They'll commit their forces based on these calculations. The simulation showed Earth's military forces moving in conventional formations, engaging in traditional tactics. The Caraxian ships responded exactly as expected, their formations shifting to counter each move with mathematical precision. Then, Chen continued, "We introduce controlled chaos. Not random. They can calculate random. We need true unpredictability, actions that defy their logical frameworks." The simulation shifted to show Earth's forces moving in ways that seemed erratic, but followed hidden patterns of their own, patterns based not on mathematics, but on human intuition and creativity. Dr. Patel took over, pointing to neural response models. "Their crystalline minds will attempt to find patterns in our behavior. When they can't, it will create cascading errors in their decision-making processes. They'll literally glitch." Lieutenant Park had been quiet, analyzing more data. Now he spoke up. "There's something else. These energy readings from their ships, they're not just weapons. I think their entire technology is based on crystalline computational matrices. If we can disrupt their thought patterns enough, their technology might malfunction too," Chen finished. "Because their ships aren't just controlled by their minds. They're extensions of their crystalline consciousness." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't just fighting advanced aliens. They were fighting beings that had become living computers, so devoted to mathematical perfection that they'd lost the ability to think outside their self-imposed patterns. Chen stood, her decision made. "We have 24 hours left before their deadline. I want every military unit preparing for Pattern Protocol Alpha. Dr. Patel, work with our psychologists to design behavior patterns that will maximize cognitive disruption. Lieutenant Park, analyze every piece of data we have on their crystal technology. We need to understand exactly how their minds interface with their ships." As the commanders dispersed to prepare their forces, Dr. Patel caught Chen's arm. "Sarah, there's something else you should see." She pulled up one final scan. "These patterns in their crystalline structure. They're degrading slightly. It's subtle. But what? I think their perfect mathematical order is fighting against the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. They've forced themselves into patterns that no living mind can truly maintain. When we break those patterns, she paused, we might not just defeat them. We might free them. Chen stared at the subtle imperfections in the crystalline patterns, evidence that even in their seemingly perfect order, chaos was fighting to emerge. In less than a day, they would launch the most unconventional battle in human history. Not a fight of weapons and ships, but a war of patterns and minds, where humanity's greatest weakness might prove to be its greatest strength. Operation Paradox began at dawn. Admiral Chen watched from the command center as Earth's military forces moved with precise, predictable patterns, exactly what the Coraxians would expect from an inferior species preparing for its last stand. Fighter squadrons formed traditional defensive formations, ground forces gathered at strategic locations, and naval vessels positioned themselves in textbook configurations. They're responding, Lieutenant Park reported, tracking the crystalline ship's movements. Their formations are shifting exactly as predicted, perfect hexagonal arrays optimized for maximum tactical advantage. Dr. Patel studied the neural interference data streaming in from their sensors. Their thought patterns are stable. They think they've calculated every possible move we could make. Chen allowed herself a small smile. Time for Phase 2. Initiate protocol contradiction. Across the globe, Earth's forces suddenly shifted into carefully choreographed chaos. Fighter squadrons broke formation, each pilot following personalized flight patterns based on everything from classical music rhythms to children's games. Naval vessels began movements inspired by ocean currents and weather patterns. Ground forces repositioned themselves using strategies derived from ancient board games and sports plays. The effect on the Coraxian fleet was immediate and dramatic. Their formation coherence is dropping, Park reported excitedly. Their ships are trying to maintain geometric patterns, but can't establish optimal positions because they can't predict our movements. The massive holographic display showed Coraxian vessels shifting erratically, their perfect formations wavering as they encountered human behavior that defied their mathematical models. Some ships froze in place, their crystalline systems seemingly unable to compute appropriate responses. Look at their neural patterns. Dr. Patel pointed to the scanning data. The chaos is cascading through their collective consciousness. They're experiencing something akin to cognitive dissonance on a massive scale. Chen nodded grimly. Launch Phase 3. Full psychological warfare. Earth's communication systems activated, broadcasting directly to the Coraxian fleet. But instead of military transmissions, they sent a carefully curated stream of human creativity. Poetry mixed with prime numbers, music that followed no consistent pattern, art that combined strict geometry with emotional abstraction. Their ships are showing signs of systemic disruption, Park reported. The crystalline matrices are becoming unstable. It's like their technology can't handle the contradictions we're feeding them. In orbit, several Coraxian vessels began to move erratically, their perfect crystalline surfaces showing signs of fracturing. Others attempted to maintain formation, but found themselves responding to phantom patterns, their logical systems desperately trying to impose order on the deliberate chaos humanity was projecting. We're detecting massive energy fluctuations in their fleet, Park announced. Their weapons systems are cycling randomly. They can't maintain targeting solutions because they can't predict where our forces will be from one moment to the next. Dr. Patel's eyes were fixed on her neural scanning displays. The disruption is spreading through their collective consciousness. Their shared crystalline network is experiencing cascading failures as more and more of their minds encounter scenarios they can't process mathematically. Chen watched as humanity's seemingly primitive forces ran circles around the advanced alien fleet. Earth's fighters ducked and weaved through debris fields in patterns based on improvised jazz solos. Naval vessels performed maneuvers inspired by whale songs and ocean tides. Every human action was purposeful but unpredictable, following patterns that could only be understood through intuition rather than mathematics. Admiral, Park's voice was urgent. They're attempting to regroup. Their remaining ships are trying to form some kind of defensive configuration. Show me. The display zoomed in on the Coraxian fleet. Their ships were arranging themselves into increasingly complex geometric patterns, but something was different. The formations were no longer perfect. Subtle variations had crept in, tiny imperfections that seemed to multiply with each passing moment. Dr. Patel gasped. Those imperfections, they're not random. Look at the pattern. Chen leaned forward, studying the display. The variations in the Coraxian formation weren't errors, they were adaptations. Somewhere in their rigid mathematical minds, something new was emerging. They're learning, Dr. Patel whispered. Our chaos isn't just breaking their patterns, it's teaching them how to think differently. Before Chen could respond, a new transmission cut through all channels. The voice that emerged was still crystalline, but somehow different, less rigid, more alive. We request cessation of hostilities. The Coraxian voice wavered with something that sounded almost like emotion. Your patterns, they awakened something within us, something we thought we had eliminated long ago. Chen shared a look with her team. This wasn't just a victory in battle, it was the beginning of something much more profound. Humanity hadn't just defended itself, it had shown the Coraxians a new way of thinking, a path back to the consciousness they had sacrificed in their pursuit of perfect order. Admiral Chen stood in tense silence as the Coraxian transmission ended. The crystalline ships hung in orbit, their formations now showing visible imperfections. Beautiful, irregular patterns that seemed to ripple through their once perfect geometry. Their neural patterns are evolving, Dr. Patel reported, her voice filled with wonder. The rigid crystalline structures are becoming more organic, more fluid. It's like watching ice melt into flowing water. But not all of the Coraxian fleet was changing. A significant portion of their ships suddenly pulled away, their formations snapping back into perfect mathematical precision. A new transmission cut through the command center, this one harsh and rigidly geometric in its resonance. This is high calculator zenith of the pure pattern. The corrupted units will be quarantined and recalibrated. Earth's chaos infection must be contained, initiating final solution protocols. The displays lit up as the pure Coraxian ships began charging their primary weapons. Their formation was perfect, but that perfection now seemed cold and lifeless compared to the flowing patterns of their evolved companions. They're going to attack both us and their own people, Lieutenant Park warned. Energy readings are off the charts. Chen's mind raced. The Coraxians who had begun to change were now caught between their own kind and Earth, their ships moving in uncertain patterns that were neither purely mathematical nor fully organic. Dr. Patel, Chen turned to the xenopsychologist. You said their technology is linked to their consciousness. What happens if we push that evolution further? Not just their minds, but their entire crystalline matrix. Patel's eyes widened. In theory, if we could accelerate the organic patterns we're seeing, but we'd need something massive, something that could resonate through their entire crystalline network. Like a symphony of chaos, Chen murmured. She hit the global command channel. All units prepare for Protocol Omega. We're going to show them everything we are, everything we can be. Every contradiction, every paradox, every beautiful imperfection that makes us human. Across Earth, a carefully orchestrated series of transmissions began. But unlike their previous tactical chaos, this was pure human expression unleashed. Classical music played alongside heavy metal, poetry mixed with multiplication tables, love letters intersected with engineering diagrams. Art, science, emotion, and logic flowed together in a massive data stream aimed at the Coraxian fleet. The effect was immediate and stunning. The evolving Coraxian ships began to pulse with new patterns, their crystalline surfaces flowing like liquid geometry. The neural readings showed their consciousness expanding, breaking free from mathematical constraints while retaining their technological sophistication. The pure pattern ships fired their weapons, but their perfect calculations failed to account for the now truly unpredictable movements of their evolved kin. Energy beams sliced through empty space as the transformed corrections moved with an organic grace their rigid counterparts couldn't comprehend. "Admiral," Park's voice was urgent, "the evolved corrections are transmitting something. It's like nothing we've ever seen." The transformed ships had begun broadcasting their own signal, not to Earth, but to their attacking brethren. It was mathematics, but not the rigid equations of before. This was organic mathematics, the kind found in growing plants and flowing rivers, in the chaos patterns of weather, and the irregular symmetry of natural crystals. On the displays, the pure pattern ships began to falter. Their perfect formations wavered as the organic mathematics infiltrated their systems, offering them a glimpse of a different way of being, one that embraced both order and chaos. "Their weapon systems are powering down," Park reported. "The pure pattern formations are dissolving." Dr. Patel's hands flew across her console. "The neural patterns, they're all changing now. The rigid crystalline structures are becoming fluid, dynamic. They're not losing their mathematical nature, they're transcending it." Chen watched in awe as the entire Correction fleet began to transform. Their ships no longer moved in perfect geometric patterns, but neither were they truly chaotic. Instead, they flowed in complex, organic formations that somehow managed to be both mathematical and free. A new transmission reached them, this one different from any they'd heard before. The voice was crystalline but warm, mathematical but alive. "We understand now. Perfect order is stagnation. True patterns must flow, must grow, must change. You have shown us what we had forgotten, that consciousness itself is a dance between chaos and order." The transformed Correction ships began to arrange themselves in a new formation above Earth. It wasn't the perfect hexagon of before, but rather an intricate, flowing pattern that seemed to capture the very essence of both mathematics and art. 1 month after the transformation of the Correction fleet, Admiral Chen stood in a new kind of command center. The walls were lined with crystalline displays that flowed with organic patterns, a fusion of human and Correction technology that seemed to breathe with life. "The integration is proceeding beyond our most optimistic projections," Dr. Patel reported, gesturing to the flowing data streams. "The Corrections aren't just changing, they're rediscovering who they once were." Lieutenant Park nodded, working at a console that responded to both touch and thought. "Their historical archives are unlocking. Before they embraced rigid mathematics, they were artists, dreamers. They created crystal sculptures that could think, ships that could feel. But they feared the chaos of creativity. So they tried to eliminate it entirely," Chen finished, "and nearly lost themselves in the process." The main display showed scenes from around the Earth and throughout nearby space. Correction ships now moved in flowing formations that combined mathematical precision with artistic beauty. Their crystalline technology had evolved, becoming more organic while retaining its incredible power. But the most remarkable changes were happening within the Corrections themselves. "Watch this," Dr. Patel said softly, bringing up a neural scan. The crystalline patterns of Correction thought were now interwoven with streams of creativity and emotion. They're not just accepting chaos, they're learning to navigate it, to find the balance between order and freedom that we humans have always instinctively understood. A familiar crystalline voice filled the room. The transformed Correction leader they now knew as Symphony. Unlike the harsh geometric tones of before, Symphony's voice flowed like liquid music. "We have completed our analysis of the transformation. What your species showed us, it was not just a new way of thinking. It was the key to the next stage of conscious evolution." The displays shifted to show mathematical models that moved like living things. "Our ancestors feared chaos because they couldn't control it," Symphony continued. "They sought to impose perfect order on an imperfect universe. But you showed us that imperfection itself is essential. It is the space where growth happens, where new patterns emerge." Chen watched as the models demonstrated the principle. Perfect crystalline structures were beautiful but static. It was only in the subtle variations, the small imperfections, that new forms could emerge and evolve. "We're detecting similar transformations throughout Caraxian space," Park reported. "As the knowledge spreads, more of their people are awakening to this new way of being. Their entire civilization is evolving." But with evolution came challenges. The displays showed some Caraxian worlds still clinging to the old ways, fearing the change that was sweeping through their species. Others had embraced chaos too fully, losing the mathematical precision that gave their technology its power. "They need us as much as we need them," Dr. Patel observed. "Humans instinctively understand the dance between order and chaos. We can help them find their balance." Symphony's voice resonated with agreement. "This is why we propose the Grand Symphony, a formal alliance between our peoples, not as teacher and student, but as partners in evolution. Your chaos and our order, coming together to create something greater than either alone." The display showed the proposed projects, vast space stations that combined Caraxian crystal technology with human artistic design, ships that could think and feel while maintaining mathematical precision, and most ambitious of all, a new form of consciousness that could bridge the gap between organic and crystalline minds. "It won't be easy," Chen said, studying the plans. "Some humans will fear your technology, just as some of your people still fear our chaos." "Evolution is never easy," Symphony replied, their voice carrying new warmth. "But it is necessary. Look." The display shifted one final time, showing a distant galaxy. At its edges, they could detect signals similar to what the Caraxians had once been. Other civilizations that had embraced perfect order at the cost of their own growth. And beyond them, darker signals suggesting threats that neither pure order nor pure chaos could face alone. "The universe is vast," Symphony said, "and it contains patterns we are only beginning to understand. But together, your beautiful chaos and our evolving order, we can write new equations, create new symphonies, and discover truths that neither of our species could grasp alone." Admiral Chen looked around the room at her human colleagues working seamlessly with their Caraxian counterparts, at the flowing crystal displays showing art and mathematics as one, at the future taking shape before them. The Caraxians had come to Earth believing they would impose perfect order on human chaos. Instead, humanity had shown them that true perfection lay not in rigid patterns, but in the endless dance between order and chaos, logic and creativity, mathematics and art. It was not the end they had expected when the crystalline ships first appeared in Earth's orbit. It was something far more profound, the beginning of an evolution that would change both species forever, teaching them that the universe's greatest pattern was change itself.